Not exactly, because the elites are not measured by money, by financial success only. We have no doubts that Geoffrey Chaucer was a part of elite of his days, though we don't know that the Chaucer was particularly wealthy man. And or that a person like Francois Villon, who was, as we know, hanged for stealing a ham, was he a part of elite? Yeah, the answer is yes. But financially successful? No. So it's very unique introduction of financial success as the only measure of success.
It's not. This is the whole issue. I should have addressed it. That 99% that we used to think, one of the biggest mistakes that the left still have, that they look at 99% from a socio-economic point of view. But if it's a cognitive elite, it's a completely different story and not necessarily connected to money. Could be connected to money. There is a correlation between the 1% elite and let's say 1% of oligarchy. There is a correlation, but it's not a one-to-one.
It's not one-to-one, it's not necessarily it correlates. In my personal knowledge of very wealthy people, they are not specially bright even, they are not specially clever, they are not specially cognitively able. What do they have is lack of compassion, lack of honesty, lack of virtue, and they function very well as long as they are not being caught and put to jail. Basically, I can't say that those people could be considered elite. So, Gilad, the left is not mistaken at all. The left, when speaks about 1%, doesn't speak about cognitive abilities, speaks about people with money, this 1% with money.
Exactly, the left speak about the 1% of people with money,
exactly.
And they are wrong because it is not the people with money who dominate the oppression of the masses. This is the mistake. It's cognitive. People who are working in Goldman Sachs, you know.
This is not a mistake. It's just obviously a different reading from the one that you suggest. That is the most interesting part of our society that we live through now. Why our society is so different from those that we knew before. The society that was created in the wake of neoliberalism is unlike any other that previously existed. Let's say, in society that existed in Italy in the 15th century, Raphael painted his paintings. In society of the 21st century, we see that a dead shark is being exhibited as the chief achievement of art. So we speak about totally different society with totally different achievements. And we can't say that that is because of better or more important cognitive society qualities. I personally don't understand.
I think that cognitive ability is the same. The human condition didn't change in the last 500 years. It takes a few million years. You know, this is clear. What has changed is that we don't need, and this is the biggest change in our society, we don't need manual labor. And the lack of manual labor created the people who can survive in this society are people who are able, and by the way, you mentioned something that is very true. Some of these people who are very wealthy, it's just because they are uniquely unethical and sophisticated enough to hide their crimes. You know, we see it now in the case even of Trump. You know, he managed to evade tax, but to do it within the law, and some of them regard him as a genius. So this is also possible, but as a class, it is not a socio-economic class. It's a class that is defined by ability.
Yeah, well, fine. I tend to presume certain subservience of those clever Jews. You know, those very clever Jews who studied Talmud and all that. though probably they could sit down at the table and think how smart they are, but they also knew, well, if they were sometimes sober and all that, they knew that they are perfectly subservient to the queer, to the rich Jew who sits at the most important place in the synagogue and from whom the rabbi takes orders. And even this queer was subservient to a pan, to the magnate, to an oligarch of the area. That's the man who was, let's say, had even more money, had even more wealth, had even more importance, had even more of everything. So this subservience of smart Jews is something also we should always consider. And that would refer not only to Jews of those historical Jews, but to neo-Jews. I used in my writings, when I wrote on this subject, and I don't do it for quite a long while, I use the term of neo-Jews. That is, people who are not of Jewish origin at all, but who adopted and emulated the Jewish attitudes to the world. Such people are plentiful. Kevin MacDonald said that so many people do it because it is, in his view, evolutionary successful strategy. No, there are so many explanations why. Anyway, this explanation is as good as any. So, all those kind of neo-Jews, they feel that everything they do is basically doing what they were told by the rich people. Or not necessarily they were even told, but they feel which way the rich people will give them money. In other words, if a rich person, he knows that so many workers of Teramo or Torino or any other Italian city would be mad at him, what would he do in order to save himself from their anger? He would try to break it. He would bring in immigration. So half of the anger of local workers will go against the immigrants. And the immigrants will be told that their enemy is not this kind of very rich guy who sits there, but the real enemy are the white men. You know, white men, because they have some incredible prerogative of having white skin, you know. They have white skin, that's obviously important. And why men? Because that would allow to put women also against men, and all that would be wonderfully achieved. So this is more or less thing. And when you look at it, you understand that all those clever Jews didn't achieve much. What they achieved, they got a grant. They got some kind of small money here and there. And the result is basically very miserable. Even such people as Senator Sanders, who recently was, as you remember, cheated on the competition for the Democratic Party nomination. You know, he is a senator. He is an important person. And still he took a bribe. He took a bribe from Clinton's people. Well, good, hefty bribe. And he used it to buy himself a big, big mansion on the island where he lives. So that is probably the biggest Jewish achievement in the United States. So, you know, my understanding and my feeling about Jewish achievements in America and in the world are not all that tremendously, you know, optimistic, and my assessment of them is not as high as that of my friend Gilad. I mean, you know, nothing to complain if we compare with the fate of an unemployed worker of Detroit. For sure, it's much, much better, you know, life of a a Jewish scribe in the New York Times, yes, much, much better. But again, you know, soul is also very important. And here I would also say that another important thing is a question of compassion and of solidarity. The elites that you remember this bell curve that we spoke about, what make the elites elites? This is a very, very profound question. The elites become elites by virtue of compassion, of their solidarity with the lower classes. One would think, you know, if we speak in kind of cold Marxist terms, that basically bourgeoisie rules over the worker and doesn't give a damn about him. But here Marx in a way confuses the Jewish attitude with normal attitude. The Jewish attitude is abnormal attitude, you know. And when we speak about normal attitude, the elites are those that care about their people. This is obviously very important. That's kind of a message which you heard in Italy many times, and I probably wouldn't be the one who would be the first to introduce it to you. In other words, in the present world where we live, there are two modes of behavior for the people who found themselves on the top of their society. One is the way of traditional elites, that is, while enjoying obviously benefits of their elite position, and I would not deny that they probably do enjoy, that still people who care about their lower classes. In England, actually, historical England, until some certain time, they did. I mean, eventually, after that they stopped. After that there was a big fencing, and then there was industrialization, and England became what it became. But in general, it is something that could exist, and this struggle for solidarity between the lower and the upper classes is something that we still can consider, and that is something that we may still think about as some sort of reality. Now, in the second thing that I wanted to say is about Jewish politics. That is also something that we refer to. Jewish politics are usually divided 80 to 20, 4 to 1 if you want. It's very rarely, I mean, such things are very rare that let's say it becomes 90 to 10. 90 to 10 that something happens now with Trump. But otherwise 80 to 20 is kind of a bit more ordinary. That is having, let's say, a second position. Well, it's in the language of finances, it's called hedging your bet. So hedging your bet, that is also a very traditional Jewish attitude. And it was also accepted by the neo-Jews and by different groups that emulate Jewish strategy. I would say that Zionism and Israel is also this alternative hedging ideology. It is a hedging ideology, and for a very long time, that's why for a very long time it was not in demand at all. Let's say 10 years ago, let's say more exactly 2007, before the big crisis, there was a feeling that neoliberalism won completely. That the victory of neoliberalism, and neoliberalism is neo-Jewish doctrine, won so completely there is no reverse, there is no way back, there is no way anywhere else, but already in the area of neoliberalism. And in such situation, when it happened, the Jews felt that there is not actually much reason to have this land-bound, there is a very good English word which I hope the interpreter will know, that is arranged, like chicken are being arranged, or like animal being arranged. This word to Jews were used by Mackinder, by Ian Mackinder, by very interesting British founder of geopolitics, whose idea was that Jews should be ranged and used for this or other utilitarian purposes of the British Empire. So this question of ranging is something that was achieved by Zionists. They created different sort of Jews who are ranged, who are implanted in some soil of their own, and who are not neoliberals. Actually, neoliberalism created so much trouble for Israelis as it created for Italians. If you speak to ordinary Israelis today, you will hear them complaining every day that their life became much better, much worse during the last 10 or 15 years or 20 years. Well, the same as probably people in Italy, in England, in the United States and everywhere else. So, neoliberalism, that is the Jewish diaspora politics, when it touched the land of Zion, it did not diminish its destructive qualities. It is as destructive there as it is destructive here. And that's why we had a little bit of, that's one of those paradoxes of dealing with Jewish question. That Jews succeed, ethnic Jews, succeed at once to support neoliberalism abroad and anti-liberalism in the Holy Land, in Israel.
2 Jews, 3 parties, miflagot, shalosh.
So, that is more or less how things are. And the division is still 80 to 20 or something like that. And before, as I said before the crisis, there was a feeling that the Zionist part is not all that necessary. If somebody still promotes Zionist line, well, they do it, by tradition or by whatever, but there is no actually big need for it. And that's why, for instance, people like Soros were considered to be anti-Zionist. Or they considered to be anti-Zionist only because they wanted to seduce the pro-Palestinian movement. Well, perhaps, but not only. I mean, people are not that Machiavellian, and if they did it, it was also because they thought that Zionist attitude is a bit old-fashioned. And now we come to a new stage in the world development. We lived already for almost 10 years after the big, or 6 years after the big crisis. The crisis is not really over, and we see that as more than we continue, mankind is going to, well, it goes, I must admit, I don't really know how to avoid saying it. It's going to catastrophe. It's going to its suicide in a way. Mankind is going towards its suicide. And the wonderful world that we saw, there is a very, very big chances that it will not exist for this or other reason, even within next 50 years. So in such situation, we obviously should look and think what should be changed, how things should be changed, and see about it in Europe, in the United States, and in the Middle East as well. I would say that if we speak about Middle East, about Palestine, about Israel, position of Israel is not bad actually. Territorially speaking, it's not bad. Yes, the Jews suffered a lot, Jews of Israel suffered a lot from neoliberalism. Nowadays, they are not that proud and they don't live as wonderful as they did when you, Gilad, were a young soldier. It's not kind of like that anymore. The officers in the army steal money, the generals steal budget, the soldiers do not really know what they do it for. Chances of an average Israeli to have an apartment are practically non-existent. And all those things make this incredible schism between Jews and Palestinians less and less relevant. So I would say that out of so many bad things, something good is also likely to come. And I am always in favor of integration. In my view, Jews and Palestinians, or I would say all kind of people who live in the Holy Land, would be able to integrate and to create one society that will go. And meanwhile, while we're here, I would say that now when I go to Ramallah and speak to Palestinians, they all tell me, once upon a time, all the Arabs felt a lot of sorry for us. They felt sorry for us. But nowadays, when they have destruction of Syria in front of their eyes, they kind of don't give a damn that much about Palestinians anymore. They say, you Palestinians, you have it better than anybody else.
Even retarded people understand.
That's more or less how things are. Palestinians in Palestine feel that due to this terrible captivity which they suffer in the hands of Israelis, they somehow succeeded to avoid the horrors of Arab Spring. Now, was Arab Spring, were the events in Syria and the events in Iraq, were they actually followed by desire to promote interests of Jews and or Israel? You know, there are a few rational kind of concepts saying what is the reason of the wars in the Middle East. And there is one group saying that all the wars in the Middle East are because of Jews, because Jews want to create Eretz Israel Shleima, the full land of Israel, that would include everything from Nile to Euphrates or something else. I would just refer to this thing for a second, that I really do not believe that could be a real thing. First of all, there are not enough Jews to populate such an area. There are not enough such Jews, even though such Jews are being created every day by virtue of Chabad movement, which can, convert anybody to Judaism, and they still, make Jews all the time. But it's not enough to populate such a thing. So I don't really believe that thing. It is though being said, and I don't want for a second to doubt that it is being said. We have now in the WikiLeaks report that Hillary Clinton said that she is going to destroy Syria for Israel. And they